So, the 19-nortestosterone is a progestin and parent compound of many birth control pills, actually. And it is used to be prescribed as HRT in US back in the day. For example, back in the day when golden era was a thing, there was no commercially, or most people were not able to have access to testosterone and esterized testosterone drugs. I mean the injectable ones. So people were using either the Seba's notorious Dianabol pills or Deca as an HRT. Was it successful? Of course not. It was not as successful as testosterone. That's why we have TRT, not HRT. Mostly nowadays, at least. So, on the contrary to golden era, especially to Arnold, Mentzer brothers were a fan of nandrolone, and it makes sense since they were a fan of HIIT training methods. They are the father of the HIIT training method, and their training approach was low volume, high intensity, and that thing over time literally slowly deteriorates the condition of your joints. Your joints, you might think that they slowly get weaker and painful. So, up to half of the women possibly have nandrolone or nandrolone derivative in their bloodstream. So, the reason is some countries use birth control pills, oral contraceptive pills, as a almost major as a first choice. For some countries use oral contraceptive as a first choice in some countries, and Morocco is one of them. Actually, as of 2018, 47.8% of the married or in union women use oral contraceptive for birth control purposes. And considering that majority of the pills are nandrolone derivative, in some countries, depending on where you live, where you are, or up to 50% of the women can actually be using some kind of nandrolone or nandrolone derivative. But also, as you can see, Morocco has the rate of 47.8. So how does it make up to 50%, you might ask? And the answer of that question is also pregnant women can be tested positive for nandrolone. They might, because it makes sense since from an evolutionary standpoint of view, because as they gain weight, they got slower. But with an androgen and a progestin like nandrolone, they either don't slow down or slow down less compared to nothing at all. So it makes sense from that point of view. So for 19-northestrone and guanine family progestins that commonly found in many oral contraceptive medications are derived from 19-nortestosterone, as I've said previously. And some of the examples are microginone, feminor, proglutone, or cycloprogniva, whatever you name it. Every country calls them differently. As I've said, its synthesis is more pronounced in pregnant females. And interaction, that 19-nortestosterone interacts with both progesterone and androgen receptors, and also it undergoes aromatization pathway, so it might aromatize and might become, not might become, it, or we know that it becomes estradiol. So understanding how that drug works and what are the side effects, what side effects are there, is quite complicated and it gets a bit tricky to understand. So the proposed mechanism of 19-nortestosterone synthesis, by that I mean endogenous 19-nortestosterone synthesis, the aromatization of testosterone precursor androstenedione, which means that it has two ketone groups, testosterone molecule that has ketone group at 17th position, and also testosterone, while they get aromatized, they lose the 19 carbon at the 19th position, and some of that, in that aromatization process, some of that nandrolone somehow gets escaped, and now you have endogenously somehow synthesized or leaked, you might have called, escaped 19-nortestosterone. So, on the contrary to almost every androgen on the market you can imagine, nandrolone's 5-alpha reduced form is even less androgenic. I suppose you already know that the HD derivatives cannot 5-alpha reduce, and testosterone derivatives can 5-alpha reduce, and 19-nortestosterone and 19-nor derivatives either don't go 5-alpha reduced, or they weakly do. By weakly doing, I mean their androgenicity does not increase, or 5-alpha reduced metabolites are actually less androgenic, and this is the case for the nandrolone. Nandrolone's 5-alpha reduced form is even less androgenic than nandrolone itself. And also, nandrolone has 22% binding affinity for progesterone receptor. That's why it is called a synthetic progestogen or progestin. So, the side effects of the decadrobalanes can be listed, and it will probably be a long list, but the most notorious side effect people most of the time complain about is erectile dysfunction. And as always, as it is with many things, most of the time the reason of the side effect is multifactorial, not one. There is no one reason. Most of the time there is not only one reason, there is multiple. And nandrolone induced erectile dysfunction is multifactorial, as I've said. The reasons can be summed up as lack of 17 beta estradiol when it goes aromatization pathway. It might be the lower androgenicity is a thing, and it is also progesterone mediated. And there is also a broad science rule to say running, you should run test twice as Deca. For example, if you run 500 milligrams of decadrobalin, they recommend you to use 1000 milligrams of testosterone to prevent erectile dysfunction. And possible explanations are any androgen other than 19-nor family to nandrolone ratio. Any other androgen to nandrolone ratio. So, if that's the case for you, a primobolan, a mastrone, can also work. instead of testosterone. And even if I don't love the equipoise, the boldenone drug, even boldenone to nandrolone ratio might prevent erectile dysfunction. And also nandrolone, as I've said, when it gets 5-alpha reduced, it gets even less androgenic. And nandrolone's lower androgenicity gets compensated by higher testosterone, by that Broad rule. And the last one is nandrolone, lack of 17-beta estradiol gets compensated by testosterone, running much higher dose testosterone, because as you know, testosterone is a substrate for aromatase enzyme. It can go aromatization. And don't forget how important estrogen is for sex drive, for libido, because estrogen is almost like a foundation of a building, of a construction. If you don't have any estrogen, chances are you will not get hard, you will not be able to sleep, and you will have constant joint aches. Literally, try taking a letrozole for a week and see if that's a real thing or not. And also, I almost forgot to mention that you'll get a worse lipid profile because you have less estrogen if you take letrozole. So be careful. Don't do something if you're not, don't use it if you're not a doctor's supervision, under a doctor's supervision. So using a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor when using nandrolone can result in having more androgenic side effects. Using a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor such as dutasteride and finasteride with nandrolone results in having more androgenic side effects, because this is due to anabolic to androgenic ratio of nandrolone 125 to 37. The reason why that ratio is 175 to 37 is nandrolone plus its metabolites. So when they test that nandrolone on rats, they test nandrolone and it's endogenously, if you exogenously administer and your body produces metabolites when it tries to get rid of that molecule. And nandrolone plus its metabolites result in androgenicity of 37, not nandrolone alone. If you remove 5-alpha reduction out of equation, aka taking a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, you're more likely experience prostate growth. You're more likely experience hair growth, facial hair growth, acne, hair loss, and vocal cord changes, also prostate growth again. And if you take a look at the chart down below, you can see that combination of 5-alpha reductase inhibitor with 19-nortestosterone result in an androgenicity higher than trastolone, even ment, and even testosterone. As you can see, taking 5-alpha reductase inhibitor with testosterone result in having less androgenicity, less ventral prostate growth, but taking 5-alpha reductase inhibitor with 19-nortestosterone results in more ventral prostate growth. So, water retention. The water retention of the nandrolone does not only come from aromatization and aldosterone. In general, 19-nor family, 19-nor androgens increase the volumization more than testosterone family, and it makes sense. They they interact with more peripheral tissue, more colloid tissues, because compared to testosterone, 19-nortestosterone family, Deca derivatives, nandrolone derivatives, have much higher affinity for progesterone receptor. They activate progesterone receptor at a much higher rate compared to testosterone, which is very close to zero. There are also like joint lubricating effects of nandrolone most people talk about. Just a second. The nandrolone's pain-killing and joint lubricating effects are well known. There is no doubt about it. For decades, powerlifters have been a fan of it. And the reason why they were a fan of it is poor programming. Poor programming is the primary reason, because only doing the 1 to 5 repetitions is likely to halt long-term progression and increase the likelihood of getting injured. If the total volume you weekly do mostly comes from 1 to 5 reps, I mean more than 60% of your volume comes from 1 to 5 reps, chances are you're doing low volume, but the joint stress is high and you will easily get injured, and probably chances are your career won't be that long. And the increased collagen synthesis is debatable because there are conflicting evidences. And lastly, while nandrolone is notorious for its joint lubricating effects, the primary reason is that the volumization, the cellular volumization, and the water retention in joints. So your joints normally have a capsule, and when that capsule is normally, you can call it a bit saggy naturally, but when you put nandrolone in the equation, that saggy capsule becomes a bit stretched, a bit fuller. You have more fluid in there, like more lubrication. But somatropin is a better joint lubricator because we know that joint pain is a side effect actually of somatropin, because it can stretch the joint capsule much effective than nandrolone in individuals who have less saggy joint capsules. So they are somewhat more predisposed to have joint ache, arthralgia side effect when using somatropin. There are people, if you have that's a naturally occurring thing. If you already have somewhat stretched joint capsule, if you use somatropin, you're more likely to get joints related side effects. But in people who have more saggy capsule, they experience decreased joint pain. Their complaints get relieved. They have less joint pain. But also at the same time, we know that somatropin is also increases the protein synthesis, collagen synthesis especially. That's where the primary increased protein synthesis come from. And if someone prefers using something for joint relief purposes, and if they have two options, the one is nandrolone and the other is somatropin, I would pick somatropin because it's well known side effect profile and also the primary effect profile, because we 100% know that it increases the recovery, collagen, increased collagen synthesis, and it's almost like it also promotes the longevity purposes. Imagine the baseball players and basketball players. What was the length of their career in 1970s and now? Back in 1970s, when GH was not a thing you can find on the market, you almost could not find a single person who was over 40 playing professional soccer, basketball, or football. But nowadays, you do. The primary reason is growth hormone, and that's so simple. And also another explanation for lubrication of nandrolone is unnecessary AI use. And in my experience and what I've seen and what I observed, most people take unnecessarily high aromatase inhibitors, and that causes joint pain. And because of that, some people cannot do even a cycle without nandrolone because of their high aromatase inhibitor uses. And other than that, we know that some people, because of the multiple reasons, they aromatase less compared to an average person, and that reason might be having a low body fat or somehow being a low aromatizer, using, like for example, a DHT derivatives so high that, or using drugs that are poor aromatase substrates that prevents aromatization of the testosterone. So in the end, you have less estrogen, less estradiol because of that. That's the thing. That's the thing to consider. And for blood pressure, the body weight is the biggest variable that affects blood pressure. The more body weight you gain, more likely you are going to have blood pressure spikes. Control your body weight and extracellular fluid. And also, excessive sodium consumption and unbalanced sodium to potassium ratio should be avoided for controlling blood pressure. As a note, be careful with also, you should be very careful with salt substitutes that have certain ratio of sodium to potassium, for example 50-50, and potassium supplements. And if you take ACE inhibitors and ARBs, you should be much careful with potassium supplements and salt substitutes, because you might have life-threatening hyperkalemia, which means having high potassium levels in blood. So combining those two together might result in having a life-threatening condition, and in the end your heart might literally stop because of that hyperkalemia. So be careful about that. For lipids, it is quite it almost sounds funny, ridiculous, I know, but for every androgen you expect decreased HDL count and increased LDL count. But nandrolone has one of the mildest side effects on lipid profile. It has one of the mildest effects on serum lipids. But it does not necessarily mean that it has the least negative effect on cardiovascular system. It does not mean that. Also, a cardio and fiber intake should be the first line of precautions you take for managing your lipids. And that's pretty much it, guys. You know, now you know how nandrolone works and how you can manage these side effects, at least in a big picture. So thank you guys for watching, and if you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Till next time, take care. Have a great day.